Have you ever felt like someone was watching you on Christmas Eve? That feeling when you're alone wrapping presents and you hear footsteps on your roof, but you know it's not Santa? What I'm about to tell you will change the way you look at Christmas forever. These are not made-up stories. These are real events that happened to real people during what should have been the happiest time of the year. Story 1: The Man in the Santa Suit. Sarah Mitchell was a single mother living in a small house in Minnesota with her 7-year-old daughter, Emma. It was December 24th, 2019, and Sarah had just finished her shift at the hospital where she worked as a nurse. She was tired, but the thought of seeing Emma's face on Christmas morning kept her going. The snow was falling heavy that night, covering everything in a thick white blanket. The streets were empty. Everyone was home with their families. Sarah pulled into her driveway at exactly 11:47 p.m. She remembered the time because she looked at her phone, thinking she had just enough time to put Emma's last presents under the tree before midnight. Emma was staying at her grandmother's house just 3 blocks away. Sarah wanted everything to be perfect when she brought Emma home in the morning. The house was dark except for the Christmas tree lights blinking red and green through the living room window. Sarah grabbed the shopping bags from her car and walked to the front door. That's when she noticed them. Footprints in the fresh snow. Large boot prints leading from the street to her front door. But there were no footprints leading away. Her heart started beating faster. She told herself it was probably just a delivery person. Maybe someone dropping off a last-minute package. But something felt wrong. The footprints were too fresh. The snow had only been falling for an hour, and these prints looked like they were made minutes ago. Sarah slowly pushed her key into the lock. The door was already open, not broken, not forced, just unlocked. She knew she had locked it when she left for work. She always locked it. Living alone with a child had made her careful about these things. Her hands started shaking as she pushed the door open. The house was quiet, too quiet. The only sound was the soft hum of the heater and the tiny motor in the Christmas tree making the lights blink on and off. Sarah stepped inside, leaving the door open behind her in case she needed to run. The living room looked normal. The tree was still standing. The presents she had wrapped last night were still under it, but something was different. There was a new present under the tree, a large box wrapped in red paper with a golden bow. It hadn't been there when she left. Sarah walked closer, her nursing shoes silent on the carpet. There was a tag on the present, in messy handwriting. It said, "For Emma, from Santa." Sarah's blood turned cold. Someone had been in her house. Someone was maybe still in her house. She pulled out her phone to call 911, but then she heard it. A sound from upstairs. Footsteps. Slow, heavy footsteps walking across Emma's bedroom floor. Her mother instincts kicked in. Even though Emma wasn't home, someone was in her daughter's room. Sarah grabbed a knife from the kitchen and started walking up the stairs. Each step creaked under her weight. The footsteps above stopped. Whoever was up there had heard her coming. Sarah reached the top of the stairs. Emma's door was open just a crack, and she could see a dim light inside. Not the normal night light, but something moving, like a flashlight. She pushed the door open with her foot, holding the knife in front of her. What she saw made her scream. A man was standing in the middle of Emma's room. He was wearing a full Santa Claus suit, complete with the white beard and red hat. But this wasn't the jolly Santa from the mall. This man was thin, too thin for the suit, making it hang loose on his body. His eyes were wide and bloodshot. He was holding one of Emma's dolls, cradling it like a baby. "Where is she?" the man asked in a rough voice. "Where's the good little girl? Santa needs to give her a present." Sarah's training as a nurse had taught her to stay calm in scary situations. She kept the knife pointed at him and spoke clearly. "She's not here. You need to leave. Now. The man tilted his head like a confused dog. But I checked my list. Emma Mitchell, 7 years old. She's been very good this year. Very, very good. He took a step forward. Stop right there, Sarah shouted. I'm calling the police. The man laughed, but it wasn't a happy laugh. It was the kind of laugh that made your skin crawl. The police? On Christmas Eve? Don't you know Santa is above the law? I can go into any house I want. Any house with good little children. Sarah hit the call button on her phone with her thumb while keeping her eyes on the man. But before she could speak to the operator, the man dropped the doll and rushed at her. He was faster than she expected. His hands grabbed for the knife, and they struggled. Sarah was strong from years of lifting patients, but the man was desperate. They fell backward into the hallway. The knife flew from Sarah's hand and slid across the floor. The man was on top of her now, his fake beard scratching her face, his breath smelling like alcohol and something rotten. His hands went for her throat. You've been naughty, he whispered. Very naughty, keeping children away from Santa. Sarah couldn't breathe. Black spots appeared in her vision, but then her hand found something. Emma's baseball bat, the pink one she practiced with in the backyard. With all her remaining strength, Sarah swung the bat and hit the man in the side of his head. He fell off her, groaning. Sarah didn't wait. She ran down the stairs and out the front door, screaming for help. The neighbors came out. Someone had already called the police after hearing her first scream. The sirens were getting closer. But when the police went inside, the man was gone. The back door was open, and there were boot prints in the snow leading into the woods behind the house. They followed the tracks for miles, but they disappeared at the river. They never found him. The police discovered something terrifying when they opened the present under the tree. Inside was a collection of photos. Photos of Emma at school, at the park, at her grandmother's house. Some were taken from far away, but others were close, too close, like someone had been standing right next to her. The most recent photo was from that very day, showing Emma through her grandmother's window, decorating cookies. They also found a notebook in Emma's room that the man had dropped. It was filled with names and addresses of children in the area. Emma's name was circled in red. Next to it, the man had written, "Perfect for my collection." Sarah and Emma moved away the next week. They spent that Christmas in a hotel room 3 states away. Sarah never found out who the man was, but she learned something from the police investigation. 3 other families in nearby towns had reported similar break-ins over the past 5 years, always on Christmas Eve, always involving a man in a Santa suit. In 2 of those cases, children had gone missing and were never found. The police believe he's still out there, waiting for next Christmas. They've named him the Santa Stalker in their files. Every Christmas Eve, they add extra patrols in neighborhoods with children. But he's smart. He knows how to disappear. He knows how to wait. Sarah still can't celebrate Christmas the same way. She and Emma now spend every Christmas Eve in a different place. Never at home. She's taught Emma self-defense and gave her a phone with a panic button, because Sarah knows something that most parents don't want to think about. Sometimes the monsters are real, and sometimes they dress up like the things children love most. Story 2: The Christmas Blizzard Nightmare. David and Jennifer Park thought they had found the perfect place to spend Christmas 2018. A cabin in the mountains of Colorado, far away from the noise and stress of city life. They had rented it for a week, planning to enjoy the snow, the fireplace, and each other's company. Their 2 kids, 10-year-old Michael and 8-year-old Lucy, were excited about having a white Christmas. The cabin was beautiful but isolated. The nearest neighbor was 5 miles away. and the closest town was a 30-minute drive down a winding mountain road. The rental owner had warned them about the weather. "If a blizzard comes," he had said, "you might be stuck for a few days. Make sure you have enough food and firewood." David had laughed it off. He was prepared. He had grown up in Chicago and knew all about winter storms. They arrived on December 22nd. The first 2 days were perfect. They built snowmen, had snowball fights, and roasted marshmallows by the fire. On Christmas Eve morning, the weather report warned about an incoming blizzard, but it wasn't supposed to hit until late that night. They had plenty of time to enjoy the day. By 3 p.m., the sky turned dark gray. The wind started howling like a wounded animal. Snow began falling so thick they couldn't see past the front porch. The blizzard had arrived early, and it was worse than anyone predicted. Within an hour, 3 feet of snow had piled up against the door. David tried to stay positive for the kids. "It's an adventure," he said. "We're safe and warm inside. We have food, water, and heat. What more do we need?" Jennifer played along, but she was worried. Her phone had no signal. The landline in the cabin was dead. They were completely cut off from the outside world. As darkness fell, things got worse. The power went out. David had expected this and had already started a fire in the fireplace. They had candles and flashlights. The kids thought it was fun at first, like camping indoors. They played board games by candlelight and told ghost stories. Around 9 p.m., they heard the first knock. It wasn't loud, just 3 soft taps on the front door. David looked at Jennifer. Who could possibly be out in this storm? He walked to the door and looked through the small window. He couldn't see anyone. The porch light was out, and the snow was still falling hard. "Hello?" David called out. "Is someone there?" No answer, just the wind screaming through the trees. He was about to go back to the living room when the knocking came again, this time from the back door. 3 soft taps, exactly the same rhythm. David grabbed a flashlight and went to check. Again, nobody was there, but in the beam of his flashlight, he saw something that made his stomach drop. Footprints in the snow on the back deck. Fresh footprints that led to the door and then away into the darkness. "Jennifer," he said quietly, not wanting to scare the kids, "take Michael and Lucy upstairs, now." She saw the look on his face and didn't argue. As she ushered the confused children up the stairs, David locked every door and window on the first floor. He found a baseball bat in the closet and kept it close. Maybe it was just someone lost in the storm, he told himself. Someone looking for help who got scared and ran away. But then he saw a face in the window. It was pressed against the glass of the living room window, a pale face with dark eyes and a wide smile. The person was standing on the porch, staring into the house. David jumped back, his heart pounding. When he looked again, the face was gone. "Who's out there?" David shouted. "What do you want?" The only answer was laughter, high-pitched, crazy laughter coming from somewhere outside. It seemed to move around the house, first at one window, then another. David followed the sound, trying to see who it was, but they were always one step ahead. Then the trying of the doorknobs started. Someone was going around the house, testing every door, turning every handle. The kitchen door, the front door, the garage door. Each knob would turn slowly, then rattle when the person found it locked. David ran upstairs to his family. They huddled together in the master bedroom, the kids crying, Jennifer holding them tight. David stood by the door with the bat, listening. The house had gone quiet, too quiet. "Maybe they left," Jennifer whispered. That's when they heard it. The sound of breaking glass from downstairs. Someone had smashed a window. They were inside the house. Footsteps moved slowly across the floor below them. Whoever it was wasn't trying to be quiet anymore. They were walking around, opening cabinets, moving furniture. David heard them go into the kitchen, and the sound of drawers being pulled open. They were looking for something, maybe weapons. "We need to hide," David whispered. There was an attic access in the hallway ceiling. It was their only chance. David pulled down the ladder as quietly as he could. He helped Jennifer and the kids climb up, then followed them, pulling the ladder up behind him. The attic was freezing cold and pitch black. They huddled together behind some old boxes, trying not to make a sound. Lucy was crying softly, and Jennifer had to cover her mouth. They could hear the intruder climbing the stairs now. Slow, heavy steps. The bedroom doors opened one by one, getting closer. The footsteps stopped right below them. David held his breath. Could the person see the attic access? Did they notice it had been disturbed? For what felt like hours but was probably only minutes. There was complete silence. Then came a voice, soft and sing-song, like a child's. "I know you're here," the voice said. "I saw your car. I saw your footprints. 4 people came into this house. 4 people are still inside." The voice continued, moving down the hallway. "It's so cold outside, so very cold. I just wanted to get warm, but you wouldn't let me in. That wasn't very nice. Not very Christmas spirit of you." There was a scraping sound, metal on wood. The person was dragging something sharp along the walls. "Do you want to know something funny?" the voice said. "I've been living in these mountains for years. I know every cabin. I know every family that comes here. I watch them through their windows. Happy families, warm families, families that have everything while I have nothing." The scraping stopped directly below the attic access. "I especially like watching during Christmas. All those presents, all that food, all that love. It makes me so hungry." David gripped the bat tighter. If the person pulled down the attic access, he would have to fight. He would do anything to protect his family. But then they heard something else. Sirens. Far away but getting closer. Someone must have seen the broken window or heard the commotion. The person below them cursed and ran down the stairs. The back door slammed open, and footsteps crunched away through the snow. David waited another 10 minutes before climbing down. The house was destroyed. Furniture overturned. Pictures smashed. Food thrown everywhere. On the wall, carved deep into the wood, was a message: "See you next Christmas." The police arrived 20 minutes later. They had been checking on cabins in the area because of the storm. They found tracks leading away from the house, but the falling snow had already covered most of them. The officer told them about similar break-ins over the past few winters, always during storms when families were trapped. They suspected it was a homeless man who had gone crazy from isolation and cold, but they had never caught him. The Parks left the next morning as soon as the roads were clear. They drove straight home, not stopping until they were back in the city. They never went back to the mountains. They never rented another cabin. And every Christmas Eve, David double-checks every lock, every window, and keeps that baseball bat next to his bed. The police called them the following year. There had been another break-in at a cabin just 10 miles from where they had stayed. This time, the family wasn't so lucky. The father had tried to fight back. He was found unconscious in the snow. He survived but lost 3 fingers to frostbite. The mother and children had hidden in a closet for 6 hours until help arrived. The intruder was never caught. He's still out there, somewhere in those mountains, waiting for the next blizzard, the next family, The next Christmas. Story 3: The Christmas Eve Delivery. Marcus Williams had been delivering packages for 8 years. He thought he had seen everything: angry dogs, weird customers, strange addresses. But what happened on Christmas Eve 2020 changed his life forever. He still can't drive past a house with Christmas decorations without remembering that night. It was his last shift before Christmas. The truck was packed with last-minute gifts that had to be delivered before morning. People were counting on him to make their Christmas special. Marcus didn't mind working late. The overtime pay was good, and he liked seeing the happy faces when he delivered presents. The night started normal. He made his rounds through the suburban neighborhoods, dropping off packages, waving at families through windows. Around 10 p.m., he checked his list. One more delivery. The address was strange. It was for a house on Elm Street, but the number was 1313. Marcus had delivered to every house on Elm Street over the years, and he had never seen a 1313. He drove down Elm Street slowly, checking the numbers: 1309, 1311, 1315. Number 1313. He parked and got out to look closer. That's when he saw it. Between 1311 and 1315 was a narrow driveway he had never noticed before. It was almost hidden by overgrown bushes. A small, rusty mailbox had the number 1313 barely visible under years of dirt. Marcus grabbed the package and started walking up the driveway. It was longer than he expected, curving back behind the other houses. The further he walked, the darker it got. The streetlights didn't reach back here. He pulled out his flashlight and kept going. The house appeared suddenly out of the darkness. It was old, much older than the other houses on the street, Victorian style with peeling paint and broken shutters. But what made Marcus stop in his tracks were the Christmas decorations. The house was covered in them, thousands of lights, but none of them were on. Inflatable Santas and reindeer that were deflated and hanging like dead things. A nativity scene on the lawn where all the figures had fallen over. Marcus looked at the package. It was addressed to the Peterson family. He walked up to the front door, which was covered in faded wreaths. He knocked. No answer. He knocked again, louder. The door creaked open on its own. Not all the way, just a few inches. "Hello?" Marcus called out. "Package delivery." A voice from inside, thin and weak, said, "Come in, please, come in." Marcus knew he shouldn't go inside. Company policy was clear about that, but something about the voice sounded desperate, like someone who needed help. He pushed the door open wider and stepped inside. The smell hit him immediately, sweet and rotten, like old fruit and something worse. The house was decorated for Christmas, but it was all wrong. A Christmas tree stood in the corner, but it was brown and dead, the needles covering the floor. Presents were piled underneath, but they were covered in dust and mold. On the mantel, stockings hung with names: Mom, Dad, Billy, Susan. "In here," the voice called from the living room. Marcus walked slowly, his flashlight showing more decay. Family photos on the walls showed a happy family of 4, but the pictures were old, from maybe the 1950s. He entered the living room and almost dropped the package. An old woman was sitting in a rocking chair. She was wearing a faded Christmas sweater and had tinsel in her gray hair, but her skin was pale, too pale, and her eyes were clouded over. She smiled at Marcus, and her teeth were black. "You brought it," she said. "The last present. We've been waiting so long." Marcus set the package down on a table. "Ma'am, are you okay? Do you need me to call someone?" She laughed, but it turned into a cough. "Call someone? Oh no, dear. Everyone is already here. We're all here for Christmas, just like always. That's when Marcus noticed them. In the shadows of the room, 3 other figures were sitting completely still. A man in a moth-eaten suit, 2 children in old-fashioned Christmas pajamas. None of them were moving. None of them were breathing. "My family," the woman said. "We wait every Christmas. We wait for someone to bring us the last present, the present that will make everything right again." Marcus backed toward the door, but the old woman was suddenly standing, moving faster than should have been possible. She grabbed his wrist with fingers like ice. "You can't leave," she said. "Not until Christmas morning. That's the rule. Everyone stays for Christmas morning." Marcus pulled away and ran. Behind him, he heard footsteps. Not just the old woman, but multiple sets of feet. The whole family was chasing him. He burst through the front door and sprinted down the driveway. The footsteps followed for a while, then stopped at the edge of the property. When Marcus got to his truck, he called his supervisor and then the police. They went to check the address. The driveway was there, but it led to an empty lot. No house, no decorations, nothing but an old foundation covered in weeds. The police thought Marcus was playing a prank or had been drinking. But Marcus did research on his own. He found old newspaper articles from 1954. The Peterson family had lived at 1313 Elm Street. On Christmas Eve that year, there had been a gas leak. The entire family died in their sleep. They were found on Christmas morning, sitting around their tree, looking like they were sleeping. The house was demolished a year later. Marcus quit his delivery job the next week. He couldn't explain what he had seen, but he knew it was real. The package he had delivered was still in his truck's computer system, but when he checked the next day, there was no record of it. No sender, no recipient, no tracking number. Every Christmas Eve since then, Marcus checks the local news. 3 times in the past 4 years, delivery drivers in different cities have reported similar experiences. Houses that shouldn't exist, families that aren't alive, packages with no record. The companies always dismiss these reports, but Marcus knows the truth. Some houses only appear on Christmas Eve. Some families are still waiting for their presents, and some deliveries should never be made. Story 4: The Mall Santa's Secret. Rebecca Chin loved her job as a mall photographer during Christmas season 2017. She got to capture the joy on children's faces when they met Santa. She had been doing it for 3 years at the Westfield Shopping Center, and she thought she knew their Santa, Harold Morrison, pretty well. He was in his 60s, had real white hair and beard, and was amazing with kids. Parents loved him, children loved him. Rebecca loved working with him. But that year, something was different about Harold. It started small. Rebecca noticed he would whisper things to certain children that made them stop smiling. Not all children, just some. The parents couldn't hear what he was saying, and the kids would never tell. They would just climb off his lap looking confused or scared. One day, a little boy named Tommy came to see Santa. He was about 6 years old, excited and bouncing, but when Harold whispered something in his ear, Tommy's face went white. He started crying and ran to his mother. When she asked what was wrong, Tommy just kept saying, "Santa knows. Santa knows what I did." Rebecca asked Harold about it during their break. He smiled that grandfather smile of his and said, "Children have such imagination. I just remind them to be good. That's my job." But it kept happening, and Rebecca started paying closer attention. She noticed Harold had a notebook where he wrote down children's names and addresses when parents filled out the photo forms. Normal stuff. Except Harold was taking photos of the forms with his phone when no one was looking. 2 weeks before Christmas, Things got stranger. Harold started asking specific children to come back and see him. He would tell parents their child was special and had won a private Santa meet and greet after the mall closed. Most parents said no, but some agreed. Harold would meet these children and their parents in the empty mall, giving them special presents he had bought himself. Rebecca thought it was sweet at first, Harold going above and beyond for the kids. But then she stayed late one night to finish editing photos and saw one of these meetings. Harold was talking to a young girl named Sophie while her mother waited nearby, looking at her phone. Rebecca couldn't hear everything, but she heard Harold say, "I know where you live. I know when you're sleeping. I know when you're awake." Every child knew those words from the song, but the way Harold said them wasn't playful. It was serious, like a warning. Rebecca started investigating. She looked up Harold Morrison online but couldn't find much. His employment records only went back 5 years. Before that, nothing. It was like he didn't exist. She found one old newspaper article about a Harold Morrison who had worked as a mall Santa in Ohio, but that man had died in 2010. She went to her manager with her concerns, but he brushed her off. Harold was the best Santa they'd ever had. Parents specifically requested him. Sales were up 30% since he started. No one wanted to hear that something might be wrong. On December 23rd, Rebecca made a horrifying discovery. She was organizing the photo files when she found a folder on the computer that shouldn't have been there. It was labeled Special Children. Inside were hundreds of photos. Not the professional ones she took, but secret photos. Children at the mall, but also at parks, schools, and even through bedroom windows. Each photo had notes. Sophie, 234 Maple Street. Parents both work. Alone from 3 to 4 p.m. Tommy knows about father's affair. Could be useful. Emma has expensive toys. Easy access through back door. Rebecca felt sick. She immediately called the police and showed them everything. They ran Harold's fingerprints and found out his real name wasn't Harold Morrison. It was Gerald Nash, and he had been banned from working with children in 3 different states. He had been using fake identities to get jobs as a mall Santa for the past 7 years. The police went to arrest him, but Gerald was gone. His apartment was empty except for one thing. A wall covered in photos of children from the mall, red circles around certain faces, a map with addresses marked, and a calendar with December 24th circled and the words collection day written in red. The police put out alerts to all the families whose children had photos taken with Santa. They told them to be extra careful on Christmas Eve. Most families went to stay with relatives or in hotels, but not everyone got the message in time. The Martinez family didn't check their phone that night. They were too busy preparing for Christmas. They didn't know that their daughter, Isabella, was one of the children with a red circle around her photo. They didn't know that Gerald had been to their house before, testing windows, learning their routine. At 2 a.m. on Christmas Eve, their dog started barking. Mr. Martinez went to check and found the back door open. Isabella's room was empty. Her window was open, and there were boot prints in the snow leading to a van that neighbors saw speeding away. The police found Isabella 3 hours later. She was walking down a highway, confused but unharmed. She said Santa had come to take her to the North Pole, but his van had broken down. He had told her to wait while he got help, but she decided to walk home instead. They found the van abandoned 2 miles away. Inside were ropes, children's clothes, and a list of 23 addresses. Isabella had been the first stop. If she hadn't walked away, Gerald would have continued to the other houses. They never caught Gerald Nash. Security footage showed him at a bus station, but the trail went cold after that. The FBI believes he's still out there, probably in another state. possibly working as another mall Santa under another fake name. Rebecca quit her job and moved to another city. She can't look at mall Santas anymore without wondering who they really are. She knows that most are good people who love children, but she also knows that sometimes predators hide behind the masks we trust most. The mall increased their background checks after that, but it was too late. 23 families had their addresses and routines documented by a predator. They all moved within the year. Some children still have nightmares about Santa coming to get them. And somewhere out there, Gerald Nash might be putting on a red suit again, making a new list, checking it twice. Story 5: The Christmas Guest. The Johnsons had a tradition. Every Christmas Eve since 1995, they would invite someone who had nowhere else to go to join their family dinner. Usually it was someone from their church, or a neighbor who was alone. It was their way of spreading Christmas joy. But in 2021, they invited the wrong person. It started when Mrs. Johnson met a young man named Peter at the grocery store on December 23rd. He was standing in the frozen food section, looking lost. When she asked if he needed help, he explained that he had just moved to town for work and didn't know anyone. He would be spending Christmas alone in his apartment with a microwave dinner. Mrs. Johnson's heart went out to him. He seemed so nice, well-dressed, polite, about 25 years old with kind eyes and a shy smile. She invited him to their Christmas Eve dinner. Peter seemed surprised and grateful. He accepted immediately. On Christmas Eve, Peter arrived right on time. He brought a bottle of wine and flowers for Mrs. Johnson. He charmed everyone immediately. He played games with the kids, helped in the kitchen, and told funny stories about his travels. Mr. Johnson liked him so much he offered to help him find a better job in town. The dinner was perfect. Turkey, all the fixings, homemade pie. Peter ate like he hadn't had a good meal in months. He complimented everything and even asked for recipes. The Johnsons' teenage daughter, Ashley, thought he was cute. Their son, Mark, liked talking to him about video games. After dinner, they all sat in the living room to exchange presents. Peter apologized for not bringing gifts, but Mrs. Johnson said his presence was gift enough. That's when Peter said something odd. "You know, the last family I spent Christmas with had the same tradition, inviting strangers in. They were so trusting, so foolish." The way he said foolish made everyone pause. His smile was still there, but something had changed in his eyes. Mr. Johnson laughed nervously. "Well, we believe in Christmas spirit, helping others." Peter nodded slowly. "Yes, Christmas spirit. That's what the Andersons believed too, and the Millers, and the Garcias." He took a sip of wine. "They all invited me in, fed me, trusted me, and then—" He let the sentence hang in the air. The room had gone cold despite the fireplace. Ashley moved closer to her mother. Mark stopped playing with his new game. "Then what?" Mr. Johnson asked, his voice harder now. Peter smiled wider. "Then I thanked them, just like I'm thanking you now. You see, I collect something from each family, a memento, something to remember the night by." He reached into his jacket pocket. Mr. Johnson stood up, ready to protect his family, but Peter just pulled out a phone. He showed them the screen. It was a photo of the Johnson family from earlier that evening, sitting at dinner, laughing, but the photo was taken from outside, through the window. "I always scout the families first," Peter explained calmly. "I watch them for weeks, learn their routines, their traditions. The Johnsons who invite strangers to dinner. So predictable, so easy." Mrs. Johnson had her phone in her hand under a pillow, secretly dialing 911. Peter noticed. "Go ahead. Call them. Tell them Peter is here. They won't find any Peter in their system. That's not my real name, just like it wasn't my real name with the other families." "What do you want, Mr. Johnson demanded. Peter stood up, still smiling. "What do I want? I want what I always want, to teach people a lesson about trust, about inviting strangers into their homes, about putting their families at risk for the sake of feeling good about themselves." He walked to the Christmas tree and picked up one of the family ornaments, a handmade one with all their names on it. "This will do nicely for my collection." "You're sick," Ashley said, finding her voice. Peter laughed. "Sick? No, I'm a teacher. And here's your lesson. I've been in your house before. 3 times actually. Once when you were all at church, once when you were sleeping, and once, well, Mark, remember when you thought you heard something in the basement last week? That was me." Mark's face went pale. The family looked at each other in horror. "I could have done anything," Peter continued. "Anything at all. But I didn't. Because I wanted you to know. I wanted you to learn. Every time you invite a stranger in, you risk everything. Your safety, your children, your lives." The sirens were getting closer now. Peter heard them and walked toward the door. "The police will catch you, Mr. Johnson said. Peter shook his head. "No, they won't. They never do. The Andersons in Portland couldn't describe me properly. The Millers in Detroit thought I had brown hair. The Garcias in Phoenix said I was Hispanic. I'm whoever I need to be. And next Christmas, I'll be someone else, sitting at another family's table, teaching another lesson." He opened the door. "Thank you for dinner. It was delicious. Oh, and Mr. Johnson, you should really fix that lock on your basement window. It's been broken for months." He walked out into the snow and disappeared before the police arrived. They searched for hours but found no trace of him. No footprints led away from the house. It was like he had vanished. The police took the Johnson statement but seemed skeptical. There were no reports of anyone matching Peter's description. No similar cases in Portland, Detroit, or Phoenix. At least, none that were reported. They suggested the family had been pranked or that Peter was just a disturbed individual trying to scare them. But the Johnsons knew better. They installed security cameras, changed all their locks, and fixed the basement window. They never invited strangers to dinner again, and every Christmas Eve, they wonder if Peter is out there, sitting at another family's table, smiling that terrible smile, preparing to teach another lesson. A week later, they received a package with no return address. Inside was a photo album. Each page had a picture of a different family at Christmas dinner. The Andersons, the Millers, the Garcias, and a dozen others they didn't recognize. All the photos were taken from outside, through windows. On the last page was a photo of the Johnsons from that night, with Peter sitting at their table. Written below it were the words, "The Johnsons, December 24th, 2021. Lesson learned?" They turned the album over to the FBI, but it led nowhere. No fingerprints, no DNA. The photos were printed on common paper available anywhere. The families in the photos couldn't be located, or if they were found, they denied anything had happened. But sometimes, late at night, the Johnsons get messages, texts from unknown numbers, always the same, pictures of other families through windows, celebrating Christmas, unaware they're being watched, and always with the same caption, "Should I teach them too?" The Johnsons never respond. They know it won't stop him. Somewhere out there, Peter, or whatever his real name is still teaching his lessons, still accepting invitations, still collecting his mementos. And every Christmas Eve, families around the country invite strangers into their homes, never knowing if they're inviting in Christmas cheer or Christmas fear. These 5 families survived their Christmas nightmares, but they're forever changed. They lock their doors tighter, they check their windows twice, they question every stranger's smile, because they learned something most people don't want to believe. Evil doesn't take a holiday. It doesn't rest on Christmas Eve. Sometimes, it uses our kindness against us. It hides behind Santa suits and friendly faces. It knocks on our doors when we're most vulnerable, when we're full of trust and joy and Christmas spirit. So this Christmas Eve, when you're safe in your home with your family, remember these stories. Remember Sarah and the Santa stalker who's still out there. Remember the Parks and the mountain madman who waits for blizzards. Remember Rebecca and Gerald Nash who might be at a mall near you. Remember the Johnsons and Peter who teaches terrible lessons. Check your locks. Trust your instincts. And if someone knocks on your door late at night, maybe don't answer. Because not everyone who comes calling on Christmas Eve brings good tidings. Some bring nightmares that last forever. Sweet dreams, and Merry Christmas, if you can still enjoy it after hearing these true stories.